There have been 17 school shootings where someone was hurt or killed in the first 3 months of 2018. While it may be easy to ignore the headlines as something that could never happen here at home, the truth is it already has. 20 years ago today, 5 people were shot and killed at Westside Middle School in Jonesboro. This week, I sat down with a student who has never spoken before this anniversary and the prosecutor that presented the case to find out what they think about school safety in America 20 years later. It's a quiet day at Westside Middle School. It's spring break, just like it was 20 years ago. The students had no idea what would unfold when class was back in session.
I was just a couple classes down in this hallway here, and we'd all come out of this door, come out in this area here whenever the fire alarm was pulled.
And where were they?
They were just on the other side of that wood fence line there.
Tristan McGowan was 13 when classmates Andrew Golden and Mitchell Johnson opened fire on the crowd of students standing in the yard.
I don't want to be going outside like at recess at school no more.
Why?
Scared.
The only reminder of what happened here 20 years ago is this memorial garden. The pavilion is supported by 5 beams that form a cross honoring the lives of the 5 victims that were lost. Even every sidewalk has been replaced. This plaque says it is so no child has to walk where others have perished. Natalie Brooks, Paige Ann Herring, Stephanie Johnson, Brittany Varner, and their teacher, Shannon Wright, were killed. McGowan was one of the 10 injured.
I was probably standing just about like this, and it hit me underneath my arm and kind of slung me around a little bit. And I didn't really know at the time what it was. I just knew that it was a pretty intense pain.
You got shot by your own cousin.
Yes, ma'am.
How do you even process something like that?
There's no way to really process it, I don't believe. You know, whether he meant to shoot me or not, or it was just a wrong place at the wrong time.
Tell me what you remember about March 24th, 1998.
It's easier to tell you what I don't remember. I remember most of March 24th.
Mike Walden was deputy prosecutor at the time of the shooting.
I remember being in my office when the sirens started to accumulate, and we look out and one ambulance after another sort of passes by until it's starting to get your attention. You say, what the heck is going on?
He and the other prosecutors followed the sirens to Westside.
You know, once out at the scene, you can imagine, I mean, it was still fairly chaotic, but there were still several fatalities on the ground. They'd been covered, and while we stand there in the midst of that, another deputy sheriff brings me up. He's walking toward me, he's got a piece of paper in his hand. He says, we've got 2 suspects in custody. And the first question I asked him, I said, how old are they? And he said 13 and 11.
The boys, now men in their 30s, were charged as juveniles, meaning they would only be held until their 18th birthdays unless a separate facility for offenders 18 to 21 was built. So the state had it built, and the boys were held until their 21st birthdays. These 2 guys are the only 2 mass school shooters in U.S. history that are either not dead or behind bars. What do you think about the fact that these guys are free to live their own life?
I don't agree with it really whatsoever. They should have both been tried as adults from the get-go.
In 1999, Arkansas was the first state to change its law so juveniles under the age of 14 could be charged as adults in cases of capital murder or murder in the first degree.
It's not fair for them to be walking around free like nothing happened.
Many of the victims of the Westside shooting are now parents themselves. I spoke to several who weren't ready to go on camera even after all this time. Just because they were part of the same tragedy doesn't mean they share the same opinions. There's so much we can learn from the people who were there. I asked McGowan and Walden how we can better protect our kids.
But there's only so much that we can do and still let our kids live a normal life and not scare them.
Across Arkansas, many districts aim to have school resource officers, a move both men agree with. Since the Parkland shooting, much of the national focus has turned to arming teachers.
I would be comfortable with that because that's just an extra sense of protection.
The legislators and the politicians are smarter than me. I don't see how that solves the problem. I don't see how that addresses the problem.
I asked the men what they think of the Parkland students organizing, rallying, and making demands.
They don't really know why that they're marching, some of them, and they're marching for the wrong reasons. Everybody's jumped on board with gun control. That's not where everything lies at.
I find, like a lot of people, these Parkland kids to be an inspirational group. I hope they can maintain their resolve. I think it's going to be a challenge for them, because I think it's probably a generational kind of thing. I don't think they're going to get our present group of politicians to change their votes or change their attitude.
The two men also have very different opinions about gun control.
You know, when people tell me, well, it's a mental health issue, I say, well, I think there's probably mental health issues in Europe and Japan and Australia, and they don't seem to have these problems. And when they tell me it's violent video games, I think to myself, well, I think, isn't Japan wall-to-wall video games at this point? They don't seem to have this problem. I think, I mean, the only common denominator that I see, or the lack of a common denominator, is, you know, we've got a situation where a large organization in our country is determined to put, you know, AK-47s or weapons of mass destruction in as many hands as possible.
There's always going to be something else for people to get a hold of to cause violence, whether it be a gun or anything.
Do you think we as an American society are doing enough to protect our children in schools?
Yes, they're putting forth effort to protect them in the schools, as far as officers on the school grounds, but it still goes beyond that. It goes back to the parents and their home life and the way the kids are raised nowadays.
Schools have the funds and resources to have school resource officers. Some don't. So I'm sure that in some ways it is better, but you know, the kinds of solutions that I've seen don't really lead me to think that they will bring an end to school shooting.
Have you forgiven them?
No, I haven't. To some extent I have, because forgiveness is the right thing to do, but part of me won't ever forgive them, nor forget about it.
A lot of damage has been done, and a lot of damage is done every time something like this happens, and it goes a lot deeper, and the tentacles go out a lot further than we can ever imagine.
Andrew Golden's last known address was in Missouri, only a few dozen miles northwest of the school. Mitchell Johnson was released from federal prison in 2015 on an unrelated charge and is on supervised release in Texas. As discussion swirls about what to do to keep students safe, McGowan tells me no legislators have asked the students of Westside what they think would help. THV 11 this morning. We'll be right back.